the two other speakers, I'll definitely read your book and dwell more thoroughly on your article. Sorry?
Sorry. Just doubting.
Is it on Kindle?
Doubting
You'll crash your Kindle if you download it.
Okay, so I think starting from Greece is what I'll do too. And maybe, I know you've got the discussion this afternoon on the party, but I think in a way a lot of these discussions now lead to the need to talk about the implications of this thinking about government and power for the kinds of party organisation we think of now. And I mean, I think I very much agree with Alan on Syriza. I don't feel, I mean, I'm not like, in daily touch, but I don't feel this dynamic to the right. As somebody, Jane I think said, it is a hugely contested kind of sphere. And not only that, I think it's not a part, we know it's not a party in a traditional sense, but that's not just saying it's a coalition, but that actually it's not got a sort of party apparatus. I mean, it's got a party apparatus, but it's not a party apparatus that's very significantly like above or separate from the movements. I think in a way, the problem with the Greens, and we can learn a bit from the Greens, they allowed themselves to become very sort of shaped by being in Parliament. So the German Greens did develop almost like an autonomy from the movements. I mean, I'd say another factor is that the movements that they related to were not really, they didn't have much orientation towards the workers' movement. And I think that's obviously a problem. But I think a turn to the right is often to do with a party developing its own sort of organisational interests, that make it sort of preservative of itself and its career, all sorts of career interests and sort of autonomy within the parliamentary sphere. And I think in a way, Syriza has almost consciously sort of built the antidote to that in its structures. It's almost built the kind of suicide of the careerist into its organisational form. So, for example, I mean, this is maybe a small example, but the money that it gets and that the German Greens get, and many parties in European states that have that funding, state funding, sort of legislation, that money in the case of Syriza goes out to the movements, to the solidarity committees. The German Greens and many other parties that have moved to the right, it became very much sort of to do with people building their party offices and party careers and their own income and so on. So I think that's kind of fundamentally different and does go into the question of party form. If we take Phil's point about the distinction between power and government and we think, well, what kind of an organisation, what kind of political organisation is needed to develop this transformative power, then I think it leads to a different kind of party from anything we've seen, really. I mean, I don't know enough about sort of left parties historically, but I don't think we've seen the kind of party that's needed to actually develop transformative power, transformative capacity, that is a precondition for a workers' government that isn't just taking office, but is actually sort of preparing for power. And I think that affects us now, because I'm not sure, I mean, the notion of United Front is kind of useful, but I think we've got to think about what forms of political intervention and organisation are going to develop workers' self-organisation. In the context that I've experienced, like fighting privatisation, in councils, like in Newcastle and so on. I don't know, the issue of the United Front wasn't the key question. The key question was, how do you build a really participatory political trade union that is really believed in by its members? Its members really feel strengthened by it. It's got a political vision and a sense of its members as kind of knowing political activists rather than just trade union members, wage earners and so on. So in a way, that kind of thing requires, in a way, learning from Paulo Freire as much as from sort of the Comintern, if you know what I mean. I mean, it needs that kind of new thinking about, but not new, it's old new as well, about consciousness raising, about political education, about the forms of of relationship with, like with working class organisations in the kind of working class estates that are hit by the bedroom tax and so on. What forms of organisation have really helped to politicize those kinds of movements? Red Clydeside probably has some lessons, but so it seems that we need our categories and our thinking needs to. You're telling me to end?
Well, to start to.
I was just getting going.
To start to.
Okay, right. You're very interested in endings. Okay, so. Right. Okay. So, I think because I think that just going back to Syriza, the key thing is the guy there. I can't remember his name.
John?
No, David. David. Yeah, said it was both the kind of declaration of the will to govern, but also the declaration of the commitment to end the memorandum, and that's what's going to open up the dynamics. A dynamic which might well lead to being chucked out of the euro, which is surely, the preferred dynamic, because to be against Europe is quite problematic for Syriza. So in a way, to be firm, absolutely firm, and I don't see how they can be other, because if they did capitulate on that, I think that Syriza would just implode. I mean, that's the whole basis of Syriza. So I'm less pessimistic there. So I think actually we have to be thinking about. I do think transitional demands are probably a more useful concept than the United Front, because transitional demands can be a framework for exactly this politicisation, popular education, political initiatives, because you can support a transitional demand in all sorts of ways. You can campaign for it on government, you can enact it in your own context in some way, you can develop a whole strategy around it. And I think we should be now thinking, from our own knowledge of struggles and engagement in struggles, and looking at even opinion polls, like the opinion polls now, are saying that the majority of people want to see, the railways, the mail, and so on, in public hands. So can't we, and tax, again, is where public opinion is very progressive. Are there transitional demands we could be developing with the comrades in Syriza and so on that have a European-wide category, like on taxation, corporation tax across Europe? We could have quite a simple set of demands about taxation that strengthen the position of Syriza, which, after all, tax is a key anti-austerity sort of demand. And then similarly around public ownership. I think we should be now quite practical about how we build movements which will support Syriza, but will also pose these issues for struggles here and now.
Thank you.